grateful for all of you making time to join us tonight. And I also want to acknowledge what a rough week this has been for me personally, and I'm guessing for a lot of you on the line tonight as well. Our country is absolutely facing a lot of challenges right now, and especially on the topic of racial justice and dismantling systemic racism that we have. It's really key right now that if people are interested, they know that we have a statement of support for racial justice. I put that in the chat, and that we also have resources and recommendations for CCL volunteers and leaders on how we can be active and participate in really standing up and being with people of color volunteers right now as they need the most. So please reach out with any questions you have on that front in the chat too. And I just wanted to acknowledge a name that for tonight, I'm sure for many of us, it's furthest from our mind, really thinking through really this process of leading a lobby team meeting, given everything else that's going on. With that, I do want to thank you for making the time to join us. And in specifically tonight's training, we're going to be going into the special role of you as a lobby team leader. You as a lead have a key role, and we're going to review a lot of those details. And to get us through those tonight, we have two of our wonderful regional coordinators joining us. Sabrina Fu is CCL's regional coordinator from the Mid-Atlantic region, and as a scientist who's always worked on practical problems, from synthesis of alcohol, from waste gas to remediation of nuclear and hazardous waste. Sabrina has been involved in a career basically solving societal problems. Since then, she's joined CCL and formed Howard County's group back in 2015 and has been the co-coordinator and now regional coordinator for the Mid-Atlantic region since 2016. And with her tonight is the wonderful John Sabin. John is the regional coordinator for the Great Lakes region, and he became a volunteer in 2016 with CCL, founded the Oberlin, Ohio chapter a few months later, and has served as a group leader there, and has now also served as the state coordinator for Ohio and one of our Great Lakes region coordinators with Elizabeth Dell. I do want to highlight one other link here in the chat and also featured here on this slide, and that is if any of you after tonight are interested in sharing any of the other trainings that we have available outside of what we're reviewing tonight, we do have a short link that's really easy to remember. It's just cclusa.org/preparing-for-lobby-day. And that's basically going to take you through all of the detailed information, the real high-level bullets of what we're reviewing tonight, and all of the links to the prior trainings that we've had. We've had a whole sequence that if any of them feel relevant for you and your volunteers, you're welcome to share one of them or this specific link, and you can review them and any of those details that you find relevant with your team. The two that we do highlight outside of tonight's training are the ones that Dr. Danny Richter, our Vice President of Government Affairs, has led. Last Thursday on understanding our asks, and next Thursday more on our strategy. And that will be at the same time on the same line for next Thursday if you haven't signed up for that one. So let's just review what we're going to talk about tonight. They're going to focus on the importance of leads and really emphasizing how grateful we are for all of you stepping into this role. They're going to then review some considerations for you in advance with your planning. They'll talk about some of the suggestions that you should have with your pre-lobby meetings, and then some final leadership considerations as you jump into your training tonight. And I'll just close by saying we're going to be going over a lot of details about what it takes to lead a lobby meeting. But if you walk away with one thing, it's this. The big picture of creating a team is just really having a lobby team that's working together and building relationships, as we do with everything in CCL. So in this case, you're working to create good relationships with your member of Congress and your members on the team. But ultimately, we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of how to do that and building the importance of connections and relationships tonight. So with that, thank you for joining us, and I'll pass it to you, Sabrina.
Thanks so much, Brett. So before starting this presentation about leading a lobby team, I'd like to share a quote from John Woods of Braver Angels, who will be part of our national conference. John Woods said, "Our nation faces a test right now. You could say it's a test of our commitment to social justice, constitutional liberty, economic survival. Each of these may be right, but more than anything, we face a test of our ability to hold true to the civic consciousness of American life that freedom fighters from the Revolution to Dr. King and beyond died to give life to. This is an America in which we meet injustice and political differences with moral resolve, coupled with goodwill for our neighbors and commitment to the communities that are the cradles of our shared tomorrow. This is what your leadership, all of CCL leadership, is about, a commitment to the communities that are cradles of our shared tomorrow. Leadership is so essential. We cannot function well without it. Yet, as you know, it can be time consuming. It requires a great deal of flexibility. And especially this year, we all have to step up out of our comfort zone. In the midst of a pandemic, economic crisis, and protests against the death of George Floyd and too many others who have paid the ultimate price for our country's deep-rooted systemic racism, I hope you are taking care of yourself and finding your voice in being part of the solutions we need. Each of you are stepping into the unknown, learning new technology, taking on the responsibilities of managing your own team, your own scheduling process, reaching out and coordinating all of your teammates online while balancing social distancing. We can't thank you enough for being willing to do all of that. Put yourselves on the line to help our lobby meeting go well. We are so incredibly grateful to all of you for your hard work. You truly are essential. We can't do it without you. Before we jump into tonight's training, we wanted to make sure we provide a quick review of the advantages of citizen lobbyists as we meet with our members of Congress. All of us will feel nervous going into the meeting, and that's a normal feeling. Remember, our advantage is that you don't have to be. Our advantage is that we are citizens, not professional lobbyists. So although we want to be professional, you don't have to try to be a professional lobbyist at all. This is as true here as it is for our volunteers in Canada, Australia, or any other country. Relax and be yourself. Do whatever helps you get into this mode of empowering, listening place ahead of your meetings. I personally take some deep breaths and provide gratitude for being able to engage in our democracy. Part of what sets CCL apart in the eyes of congressional offices is that we are ordinary people who care deeply about humanity. As humans, we should accept that there will be mistakes. You will make mistakes, or your teammates will. There will be things your team will say that could have been said better, and we'll show you how to handle those situations in this training. We are building relationship, so be human and embrace whatever happens. In the short amount of time that you'll have in your actual meeting, how you facilitate that meeting is important. So let's step back and consider the bigger picture for just a moment. The bigger picture is this. You as meeting leaders are well positioned to nurture and empower others. Make it one of your goals to mentor or nurture the lobby team so that they've built the capacity for this work. How does a meeting lead help others grow and empower them? The best leader shows faith in those around them. And that's what we're asking you to do. Having faith in others means that you know there are going to be some coachable moments. To feel empowered, people need to be put into situations where they can both succeed and fail, and where failure is part of the learning process. As leader, your role is to bring out the best in people. You can do this during planning or practice, during the meeting, and after the meeting. The meeting leader is like a conductor, right? The leader is there to manage the meeting, not to dominate the meeting. This means that the leader is not necessarily the one who talks the most, but who is in charge of the transition points in the meeting, between speakers, between roles, getting the conversation back on track, wrapping things up, cueing people verbally over the online meeting or non-verbally when you're doing the video feed or via group chat or text. Whenever they're talking too long or whenever we've gone off track. So if you're present, the leader also ensures that the constituents and liaisons are heard from. The leader should also be able to understand the meeting situation and respond accordingly. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And speaking of mentoring your team, one key area that as you lead, you can make connections with younger chapter members is getting the support for them from them technologically, because we all know that young people are so much better technologically, right? We go into the details of meeting roles in a bit, but wanted to highlight that this is a perfect opportunity, especially for those chapters who are looking for more ways to reach out to younger members and to encourage engagement. CCL recommends including a volunteer in each meeting who will solely be responsible for in your team for managing the technology platform you will use. Now, John will talk about advanced planning.
Thank you, Sabrina. All right, let's jump into some important considerations to keep in mind as you help your team with advanced planning, the time you take now to plan ahead of your lobby meeting, and how you can use it to empower your team during this stage. This June, all appointments for meetings are being set by CCL congressional liaisons or someone they designate. If you are a meeting lead but not a liaison, please make sure that you're working with the liaison or your regional or state coordinator. Chances are you, as the liaison or appointment setter, are already working to assemble a lobby team and create a meeting plan. If not, this is your reminder to make sure to do so as you go forward. Here are some important items for review. While setting the appointment early on, we're encouraging appointment setters to be sure to ask the congressional office how they would like to meet, by phone, Zoom, WebEx, or some other preferred platform. As volunteers, we can indicate which platform our teams might be most comfortable with, but ultimately the platform decision should be left to your member's office. As soon as you can confirm the platform, you can then set up planning meetings with your group to practice using it, especially if it's a different software than what you usually use for online meetings. If this is the case, know that all of the major platforms your office might pick have wonderful support and training pages as resources. Just Google the product name plus training/support. But to try and make life easier, CCL also has resources available for more support. You can find this on CCL Community in the Practicing Video Conference Security training page. One additional key consideration to make early on will be deciding who to best include in your team for your online meeting. If you haven't been doing so already, work with your liaison and group leaders to determine who will be on the lobby team, like you usually would for an in-district meeting. Think about who you can include, such as a local business leader, other trusted messengers, or new local volunteers on the team. The size and makeup of your group depends on what your meeting goals are. The ideal size for a normal meeting is 5 to 6 people, so you can manage your agenda to move your member up the ladder of support. A group of 5 or 6 allows for trust to build. Larger groups, though, may occasionally have advantages. For example, if your member says they're not hearing about climate from constituents, then a large group may demonstrate political will in the district or state. On the other hand, with a large group, you may not be able to have a meeting where the member feels safe enough to share concerns about HR 763 and other climate solutions. Remember that regardless of the size of your team, creating a sense of safety for your member or the staff is a primary goal for your team. If your member is very busy and has expressed a short time frame, then a smaller group might be more effective. Depending on who you pick for your team, coordinate with their schedules to find when they're available during the recommended dates the CCL is targeting for both bodies of Congress. We're trying to meet with Senate offices on Tuesday, June 16th, and House offices on Wednesday, June 17th, with Thursday the 18th as an alternate for any meeting. While many offices most likely have already gotten back to you with their preferred dates, if not, now is a good time to circle back around and confirm a time that works for the member's office and can align with your team's schedule. Now, once you've confirmed your meeting platform and who will be part of your team, let's walk through some additional considerations. Coordinating a time to do advanced planning with your team is up to you. It's important to understand this year that CCL headquarters will not be helping you to create or assign lobby teams and will not be sending out lobby meeting schedules. While CCL headquarters will track appointment times, the schedule for your team will come directly from you as the meeting lead, working with your member's office and communicating any updates to your group. CCL recommends that the lobby team meet several times online to plan and rehearse the meeting. Some teams have found it helpful to have someone role play being the member or staffer as part of your practice session. If your team includes a local community leader of some prominence, you may need to personally prepare them for the meeting. Include them in your practice meetings if at all possible. CCL trusts that your team knows your member of Congress best and can determine what you think is the best way to strengthen your relationship with that member and their staff. You'll want to make sure you have worked through any technical challenges related to whatever platform you're using, as well as practiced how you will deliver the content of your meeting. Make sure everyone on your team has the time to participate in this planning and practice. For liaisons, Amy Bennett has been providing additional guidance around planning and practice. Brett is putting a link to that in the chat right now, and you can find that later on in Community under Training and then Working with your Members of Congress. Now this year, because our meetings are online, we have some special considerations. It may be helpful to set up a text group on your phone for all of your team members. You can use this to communicate with each other before and even during your lobby meeting. Make sure to remind everyone to minimize distractions that might interrupt them during the actual meeting. People should mute phones or set them to vibrate, silence computer sound notifications, make sure pets and children are cared for, and so forth. Help your team think through what they look like on camera. Make sure their backgrounds are simple and not cluttered or distracting. Remind your team members to dress professionally if you're on a video conference call. Also, ask your team members to be mindful of how they appear on the screen. It's important to have a source of light on your face rather than from behind you. It's also good to have a relatively simple background behind you and to keep your face in the center of the screen with the camera pointing straight on, not from below. Team members should know how to put their full name on the screen for a video call and maybe where they're from. For example, you'll see that I've labeled myself here, John Sabin, Oberlin, Ohio, and it doesn't just say John's iPad. So that's a useful thing for your team members to know how to do. You'll also want to make sure that your team members have access to a good internet connection. A few tips can help with this. Members can restart their computers within an hour of the meeting. That can help. Ask your teammates to close other applications and windows on their computer and to turn off other devices in their homes that are connected to the internet. If anyone's having a lot of connection trouble, they can turn off their video camera and that will improve their connection. You're going to want to review plans with everyone for being flexible if there are any last-minute scheduling changes. If your plans change and you find that you cannot attend the meeting, please immediately contact your regional or state coordinators so they can find a substitute meeting lead. Check your email and texts at least a few times every day before the lobby meeting in case there are changes in your meeting plans with the office. This does happen sometimes, and the meeting lead is key to notifying participants and making adjustments. Announcements of a change could come from the office, and if this is the case, be ready to make sure your whole team knows, as well as your state and regional coordinators and Amy Bennett. And that reminds me, make sure you have phone numbers handy for your state and regional coordinators, and you've got Amy Bennett's email address handy. Practice, practice, practice is helpful with all of these issues. If you know that your team will be on a phone-only meeting, there are a few specific considerations. You need to think about how only audio to connect with your member will impact your goals and meeting size. Do you want to have a smaller meeting team as a result? Make sure you practice ahead of time on a similar platform to make sure everyone knows how to join smoothly. When you're on as lead, listen for clarity of audio from each member and give feedback to troubleshoot so you can improve it. Take time to practice using your group chat to share live-time feedback with each other, helping you be more adaptive on the fly with anything that might come up in the meeting, or intervening with each other if someone is talking too much. We'll review some of these transition examples in a bit, but take time to also practice cueing each other verbally. And now Sabrina is going to, that's a great question. Brett, would you like to speak to that? There's a likelihood that at some point on the call, people will accidentally jump on top of each other. So review with your team how you'll plan on handling that. Maybe the youngest person would go first, or some other rule that you decide upon. Or maybe both people will pause and let you as the meeting lead help cue the speaker. Most importantly, consider writing out a detailed agenda or point-by-point meeting script so that your team has more to go off of in their preparations for who will be doing what when. We'll get into the plan more in the next section.
Thanks, John. So we reviewed how to get your team planning process going. Now let's review some ideas for connecting and coordinating with your team. So once your team is firmed up, introduce yourself via email or better yet, call, right? We've all get so many emails these days, and a personal one-to-one phone call can help you as a lead connect and get to know each other, to get to know each member of your team, and help them feel welcome and more comfortable with what to expect. Ask which role they prefer to fill. They're new to CCL, then it might be a good time to review and explain the importance of each role, especially if you don't know the volunteers who will be joining your team. Spend a few minutes getting to know them, and this can help determine what role they'll fill and develop trust in each other. Send out an email presenting to your team members a little bit about you. Ask them to choose from a list of options for planning meeting or several meetings, or do several meetings between, just to get to know each other before the lobby date. If you email the team, you can also include any relevant links you think will help the team, such as more information about the Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act or the Reclaim Act. What about the format for these meetings? Well, you can use CCL's meeting plan template as a guide to solicit, discuss, and prioritize everyone's ideas for the lobby meeting. Key items to discuss include appreciation, primary goals, secondary set supporting asks, and the open-ended questions for discussions. You can also find additional planning review on the next slide, and then I think Brett's going to put a link in for you guys to look at. So for the for planning meeting suggestions, if you could put in the chat, what are you as meeting leads doing for this year's planning sessions? Here are some ideas while you're typing. Here are some ideas for the ideal situation, but we realize that many of us might be scrambling to get ready. I certainly am as a liaison. So any contact ahead of time is a good thing that you can have. So always try to read through the full meeting notes from previous meetings, right? So that you can get a sense of where the office stands, what we've tried before, and where we left the last time we were at a meeting. Sorry, I think I'm getting thunderstorms right now as my background. That I can't help. If there is a meeting plan submitted by the liaison, then review the meeting plan with everyone. Discuss the meeting plan strategy or create one. So this year, keep in mind that CCL has two primary asks, the Energy Innovation Covenant Dividend Act and the Reclaim Act. Review the concepts of a supporting ask, and when you would use it, we tend to ask for supporting asks when we've been turned down for our primary ask, but you can also have several supporting asks depending on where the direction of your meeting goes. If not already specified in the meeting plan, then help the team settle on one or two supporting asks, depending on what, where your office is at. As lead, you will want to facilitate the transition verbally or with your body language or cues, or in terms of virtual meetings, probably you might have to use the text on your phone. A verbal cue could sound like this. Leela, would you like to tell us why we are here today and what we're asking for? During the planning meeting, tell the team, let the team members know how you plan to cue them. Or if you've practiced well enough, your team may not need the cues, but do what feels right for your situation. Another thing to consider is that there are sample meeting outlines in community. If you have time to review them with your team, then go for it. Finally, during the planning meeting, you will want to assign roles. Excuse me, we discussed the roles in great details in planning your lobby meeting training, one of the previous CCL meeting trainings. If this question comes up from the lead time to time, this question comes up from the lead time to time. If the lead settles into a plan that you feel good about, you're welcome to email the broad overview and the bullet points for your agenda to the office ahead of time. Research from the Congressional Management Foundation office has said that doing this, many staff appreciate you doing this, and they find this as a good resource so they know what we're going to be talking about. But this is not a necessary step that CCL expects all team members to do. With issues of police violence, systemic racism, protests, civil unrest, economic downturn dominating the national dialogue right now, you may be wondering how to handle these topics in your upcoming lobby meeting. Know that as lead, CCL is empowering you to decide whether you think it is best to acknowledge the issue before engaging on climate as part of check-in with your office's congressional schedule, ahead of time. As when you send out that confirmation email, you might want to ask about how they're doing in the midst of all this. As always, we trust your judgment since you know your members and their staff best.
As the meeting lead, you should encourage everyone to participate in the discussion and be flexible enough that if the staffer or member of Congress is clearly paying attention to one person in particular, you can have that person speak more than others. After all, we say we're betting the ranch on relationships. Even though everyone is encouraged to speak when they have something to say, it is also important to have at least these 6 roles assigned so that we don't forget the basics. Planning your lobby meeting training is where we discuss each of these roles in greater detail. That training is called Lobbying 201 and is available on Community under Trainings, Lobbying, and Working with Congress. Here's a quick refresher on the roles in each meeting. We have an appreciator who offers a thank you to the member of Congress. We have an asker who gives the primary and/or the secondary asks. There's a note taker, and we'll talk a little bit more about note taking a little bit later. There's a time monitor who tracks not just the, when are we running out of time, right? The timekeeper is going to ask how much time we have at the beginning of the meeting and give everyone a signal when there's 5 minutes left. But they also track the number of open-ended questions that are asked in the meeting and what percentage of time, approximately, the member or staffer speaks compared to what percentage of time CCL volunteers are speaking. We also suggest this year that you have a tech support person, someone who's responsible for being the host, who's comfortable with the online platform, and can help people unmute or mute a line, monitor the chat, and take care of any security settings. We need a follow-up person. This is usually the liaison who's in charge of emailing the ask and any other links after the meeting. If there is a primary liaison, but they're not in the meeting, make sure to designate someone to send your ideas to the liaison. And don't forget to have a photographer. Get permission of your member of Congress or staff to take a photo or screen capture so that you can share that image with your larger chapter afterwards. Remember, your role as the meeting lead will be to assess your team's interests and skills and work together to assign coverage for each of these. So let's get into discussing leadership considerations right before, during, and after your lobby meeting. So immediately before your lobby meeting, you're going to want to have a pre-meeting huddle. As lead, you can create a separate meeting ID or a group call for your team 15 or 20 minutes ahead of your actual lobby meeting. During that pre-meeting huddle, you can remind everyone to relax, be present, and have fun. You want to go over everyone's roles, confirm, assign, or reassign roles as necessary, review the goals of the meeting, go over the primary and supporting asks, make sure everyone is in a place where they won't be distracted by a phone call, apps on their phones or computers, make sure everyone looks good on camera. Remind everyone to ask open-ended questions and then to reflect back what they hear from the member or the staffer until the team is comfortable that they understand where the member or staffer is coming from. Also remind everyone to watch out or listen for their cues, whatever you have established. Finally, you want your team members to join the main meeting a few minutes early, but try to wait for everyone to show up. Now let's talk about what the meeting leader does during the meeting itself.
Okay, so one of the things that a meeting leader does is to help people transition to the main points that we need to cover. So an example of a verbal transition might be something like, Congresswoman, I'd like to thank you for your recent efforts to protect citizens from identity theft. That's a really important issue for us as well. Today we're here to talk about another important topic. So John is going to let you know more about why we are here today and what we're seeking. In this example, I explicitly transition to John. Before John and I demonstrate a couple of other examples, there's something important to understand, that each meeting is different. So proceed in a way that's comfortable and appropriate for your situation. Being present and being a good listener are essential in determining what parts of the plans need to be scrapped. And there are times when you're gonna have to scrap the whole plan, right? I'll start off by demonstrating how you might transition from the discussion to the end of a meeting close. Congresswoman, I see that we are nearing the end of our time with you today, so we'd like to recap and clarify the main takeaways we have about the next steps that we plan to take with your office following today's excellent meeting.
Or maybe it's your fourth meeting with this member of Congress or staffer. In that case, you might choose to skip the purpose and move from your appreciation right into your primary ask. Here's what that might sound like if this is a Republican member of Congress and you've established a good relationship with them. Congressman, I want to thank you for your recent efforts to look out for all Americans who've been impacted by COVID-19, whether through their health or their economic well-being. That's a really important issue for us as well. And today we've come to discuss a policy solution that pays for itself while making our air cleaner and providing monthly cash payments to look out for poor and middle-income Americans. A lead also needs to be able to bring the meeting back when it veers off course. In the Lobbying 301 Handling Difficult Scenarios training, We reviewed several examples of how to get meetings back on track. If you're curious about more examples, I encourage you to review that training as well. But let's demonstrate one situation for you now. In this example, I'll play a member of Congress or staffer who goes off topic by bringing in the important topic of healthcare into the mix. And Sabrina will be the leader who acknowledges this comment and immediately circles back to why we're at this meeting. So the congressperson might say, the real ongoing challenge we face is healthcare in this country right now. We need deep-seated policy change given all the ways our country is broken, with access, astronomical costs, and limited coverage.
Thank you, Congressman, for raising your essential concern about reform to healthcare. We hear you, and as an organization, we don't take a position on health policy. However, we do take a position on the positive health outcomes that will stem for our country placing a pollution fee on greenhouse gas emissions. This policy isn't just about climate. It will also improve the health of everyday Americans and prevent premature deaths by reducing pollution that Americans breathe. We know poor quality alone leads to an estimated 114,000 US deaths each year and sickens thousands more. Would it be helpful for your office to connect with a public health or healthcare professional from our districts who are on the front line addressing the negative impacts? So we also wanted to talk about situational awareness. As meeting leaders, you will be doing a lot of advanced planning and preparation. That's really important. But we can't let our plans and preparations go on autopilot, right? We need to practice ahead of time, but you never know what scenario will play out. That's why we always need to be focused on what's actually being said at the moment and getting the cues from people's faces and body's language as well. So as a team lead, you need to be ready to help each other respond to what we're actually hearing, not what we expect or think we heard. As a meeting lead, you should recognize when it might be appropriate to diverge from your plan. We refer to this as situational awareness. It is the ability to perceive and understand what is happening in the moment and being able to react to challenges as they happen. Good situational awareness means that you're not only listening to the words being said, but also to the tone and the voice and the body language too. One of the benefits of having a team is that if you don't pick up on a particular cue from your member of Congress or staffer, one of your fellow lobbyists probably will. Then they can ask a follow-up question or redirect a derailed conversation.
As team leads, our goal is grounded in empowering others to thrive in their role within the lobby team, moving your member forward. One of the ways we can do that is by taking note of who isn't being heard if someone else is being too vocal. Take note if there is a power dynamic going on in your meeting with one individual or a group of individuals who've been dominating the meeting. You might say something like, Sabrina, I'd just like to pause for a moment and see if there's anything you'd like to add at this point. Remember that lobbying is a team sport, and it's our role as leads to make sure that all voices present have the chance to be part of the meeting. Another situation to look out for is the silent constituent. You may choose to encourage that person to speak with verbal cues. Sabrina, I'd like to pause for a moment. What would you like to add? You've been quiet. As with all of these transition examples, we encourage you to try practicing them out loud with your team to help them feel natural and something that your teammates can know how to use in the heat of the moment as well. What if someone on the team says something that's flat out wrong? Rather than correcting them, you might say something like this. If I may, let me add to what Sabrina was saying. Your teammate will appreciate you for not correcting them or pointing out that they forgot something. What would you do if a CCL volunteer gets agitated or angry during a meeting? This is not common, but it does happen. Be prepared for it and stay calm. Here's how it could play out. I'm going to play an angry volunteer, and Sabrina will play the team leader. So as a volunteer, maybe I find myself saying, it's you guys in Congress who are stalling and making this whole problem worse.
Congresswoman, obviously, we have very passionate people, and we're working very hard to get something done on time. You were just saying that you think driving innovation should be at the front and center of any renewable energy agenda. Could we share with you more about what we've learned regarding how a policy like the Energy Innovation Act helps drive the innovation you've uplifted as key to American independence? Other considerations to think about is that the size of your team will vary from meeting to meeting. If there's just 2 or 3 volunteers in a meeting, then each person will need to fill one or more roles. And you also might want to consider that maybe one or two of your volunteers can't come. So, always think of other things that could occur. However, if your team does end up to be a larger group, it might mean that some folks do not have to speak that much outside of the initial brief introductions into the story on why they're concerned about climate change and what brought them to this meeting. As a leader, you want to acknowledge and appreciate them for that. Having additional people in the meeting whose role is to look pleasant and affirming their interests is important. So even if they don't say much, as lead, it is key to help them. It is key for you to help them feel value for being present. Of course, if you're on the phone, you probably want to have fewer because it doesn't help to have silent people on the phone. But it does help to just even see, interested, wide range of people in your meeting by the member of Congress. Also, you may run into the situation where only minutes ahead of the time, one of your team members texts you to say that they're going to be late. Coming late has a chance of significantly disrupting the meeting. As a result, you should be clear with your team ahead of time that only if they are the only constituents, which shouldn't be in this case, right? They shouldn't come, right? People who are going to be late should not be coming in disrupting the meeting. So the final situation to review for our meeting is when volunteers have when volunteers or other unplanned attendees show up in an online meeting they're not scheduled for. If this happened to you, you're fully empowered your team member to make the swift decision to have your tech person, remove them, right? I think most of us have practiced that. If you haven't, please come, but please ask your group leader or other people to practice with you on how to essentially kick the person out and lock the room down. Given how much time and coordination that has been put into scheduling and the planning process is key for your group to feel empowered to do what it takes to have the meeting focused and on track with only those attendees who you're planning to have join the meeting. For most online meeting platforms, you can set up a waiting room or an equivalent feature to allow anyone after the meeting starts to be held in the lobby, and they would need permission for them to come in. From there, you can remove them without them interrupting them. Or, in another way, you could just lock down the room once everybody you have in the meeting has already arrived. So finally, the meeting debrief. So let's move on to So let's move on to talking about what we should do immediately following the meeting. In almost all lobby meetings this year, you will have time between meetings to debrief, as most of CCL volunteers only have 1 to 2 meetings, right? As lead, you should plan a meeting in a separate meeting ID for your team to do a debrief right after the meeting, or a separate time if you like. Make sure that the communication is clear ahead of time. A debrief is a short examination of the meeting. Here's what a debrief should look like. The meeting leader should begin by talking about what went well and take the opportunity to nurture team members. Ask the note takers to read the notes back. Look at the back of the meeting minutes to find the section called important things to capture and make sure that they have been captured. If something is missing, then fill it in. As a leader, you should verify the plan for follow-up items, like who's going to do what, and then figure out who's going to file the meeting online, and how your team will make sure that the office that you just met with is thanked.
We do have a training with more detail called How to Take Great Notes. That's in community. A few important things to remember is that our notes are confidential and should not be shared with anyone after being submitted except your lobby team and the state or regional coordinator. If these notes somehow become public, it could damage the trust that we've built up with the office. It's helpful to look at the meeting notes form ahead of time, because the meeting notes show you some of the things that CCL is suggesting that we should be looking for in the meeting. So I encourage you just to take a look at that form. The person who's taking notes should be focusing especially on feedback from the staff. What did the staff say? What did the member of Congress say? Hey, this is another piece that's on the meeting notes that asks you to identify your member's position on climate change and the innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So it's about giving a score. So, you want to come out of your meeting with a sense of whether your member would vote for the Energy Innovation Act or not, and what is their position on climate change. So this is what I mean by looking at the notes form. You have some idea of some information that you want to gather during the meeting.
Thanks so much. So above all, your work as a meeting lead is to create a sense of connection among the members of your team and between your team and with your member of Congress and their staff. Brene Brown defines connection this way. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive substance and strength from the relationship. Best wishes to all of you in your work on creating connections between the members of your team and between your member and your members of Congress. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
And don't be a stranger out there. Anything else we can do, this is a new horizon for all of us. So we're learning together and we want to help you succeed. Thank you all for stepping into leadership, and we look forward to hearing how those meetings go.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.